The first thing Lauren noticed that night wasn't the rain tapping against the window or the smell of wood smoke curling from the fireplace. It was the sound of something small tumbling across the porch, bumping into the old wicker chair, and then going strangely still. Out here in Waynesville, North Carolina, tucked against the folds of the Great Smoky Mountains, little noises often meant raccoons, maybe an opossum. But when she pushed the door open, the yellow porch light caught something entirely different. A soaked, scrappy bundle of fur, no taller than her knee, stood wobbling on the doormat like it had just crashed the wrong stage. The tiny black bear cub sneezed, once shook her head, then picked up the dish towel that had fallen from the railing. With all the seriousness of a circus star, she tugged it over her face, stumbled backward, and rolled directly into the recycling bin. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't frightening. It was slapstick. Wyatt, her 12-year-old son, peeked from behind her eyes wide, half afraid, half enchanted. And then the cub, still tangled in towel and cardboard, lifted her head, stared at them both with the most unimpressed amber eyes, and huffed as if to say, "I meant to do that." Lauren laughed before she could stop herself. Not a polite chuckle, but the deep, unguarded laugh she hadn't felt in months. The mountains themselves seemed to echo it back. But quickly the joy tangled with unease. She knew the stories. People who feed wild bears, families fined for keeping cubs overnight. Officials are repeating the same hard truth: a bear rarely survives as a bear. A moment of comedy, yes, but also a choice heavy with risk. That choice is where our story begins. It's a story of laughter colliding with responsibility, of a boy with a sketchbook and a woman with more doubts than answers, and of one small bear cub who never auditioned for the role of clown but somehow stole the spotlight anyway. Before we follow their journey, let's pause here because this opening already gives us something worth holding on to. Sometimes the things that crash into our lives, the mistakes, the interruptions, the creatures on our porch arrive looking ridiculous, but they carry a question. Will you laugh and walk away? Or laugh and lean in? To understand why that cub showed up at Lauren's door, it helps to picture the Smokies in early spring. Bears here are just waking from their winter dens. Mothers emerge first, guiding wobbly cubs through mud and moss, searching for roots and insects. Sometimes, though, cubs wander too far, chasing the flutter of a bird's wing or the scent of food drifting from cabins. A porch light can look like a beacon. A towel can look like a toy. To us, it's comedy. To them, it's practice, their first clumsy rehearsals for survival. When we laugh at a cub tumbling into a bin, we're not just laughing at silliness. We're watching instinct unfold in slow motion. That towel tug grip training, that roll balance check, that curious stare. A test of courage. Play isn't extra in the animal world. It's essential. Just as children wrestle or chase each other through backyards, bear cubs wrestle pinecones, topple buckets, or somersault down muddy slopes. The things that look like nonsense are how wild creatures rehearse life. A cub clowning on a porch might make you laugh until your sides ache, but it's also nature's way of preparing her for a future we can barely imagine. If we recognize that our laughter becomes something deeper, it becomes appreciation. Now imagine this from Wyatt's perspective. A boy growing up, quiet sketchbook always in hand, more comfortable with pencil lines than playground noise. To him, this little bear wasn't just a wild visitor. She was a living doodle come to life, a character straight from the margins of his notebook. When she sneezed and flipped backward, he whispered, "She's funnier than TV." For a child who rarely voiced excitement, that one sentence felt like an earthquake. And Lauren, hearing it, felt something she hadn't felt in years, the possibility that both of them might still be reachable by laughter, by surprise, by the mystery of the wild. Of course, wonder rarely comes without shadow. While Wyatt scribbled a fast sketch of the bear's towel trick, Lauren's mind flipped through warnings she'd read in brochures at the ranger station. Do not feed bears. Do not approach cubs. Call wildlife services immediately if you see one alone. The tension was clear compassion, pulling one way, rules pulling another. She could close the door, hope the cub wandered back to its mother. Or she could step closer, risk being accused of interfering. Every choice carried weight. And yet, at that very moment, the cub stood with her paws spread teetering like a tightrope walker on the porch railing. One gust of wind and down she went, landing in a plastic flower pot pause, flailing like a cartoon character, demanding applause. Wyatt burst into laughter, and Lauren's heart split clean down the middle. Was she watching danger, or was she watching joy? This paradox. How the same moment can be both comedy and crisis is what makes stories of wild animals matter so much to us. They remind us that life isn't divided neatly into safe and unsafe, funny and serious. It's both at the same time. And when you're standing in the doorway of your own home, staring at a cub clowning on your porch, you feel that truth sharper than ever. It asks you to pay attention. It asks you to be present. Here's the fresh perspective I want to leave you with in this opening laughter can be a teacher. It can show us what's still alive inside us. For Lauren, it uncovered her long-buried sense of wonder. For Wyatt, it unlocked a voice he didn't know he had. And for the cub, it was nothing more or less than the work of growing up. Comedy in the Smoky Mountains turned out to be serious business. So how do we carry this lesson forward by remembering that the wild isn't a stage for our entertainment, even when it looks like a circus? Every antic, every tumble, every sneeze is a survival drill written into instinct by generations. To laugh is fine. To film is tempting. But to intervene, that's where the hard questions begin. And those questions will follow Lauren and Wyatt in every step of this story. The night the mountains laughed began with a towel, a bin, and one very unimpressed bear cub. But it would stretch into something far more complicated: late-night phone calls to rescue hotlines, arguments with neighbors, even lessons in law and ethics. For now, though, all you need to know is this: a family and a cub met under a porch light, and none of them would ever be the same again. And that's where we'll leave this first scene. A door, half open. A cub tangled in mischief. A mother torn between rules and compassion. A boy sketching as fast as his hands can move. Because the real story doesn't begin with the laugh. It begins with the choice of what to do after the laugh fades. And that choice is waiting for us in the next part. Lauren stood in the doorway longer than she meant to. The tiny black bear cub was still rolling her towel prize like a comedian refusing to leave the stage. Wyatt's laughter was bouncing down the hallway, filling the cabin in a way it hadn't for months. Yet the voice in Lauren's head wasn't laughing. It was listing rules, one after another. Don't feed wild animals. Don't keep cubs. Don't interfere. She had heard it from rangers, read it in brochures, seen it on warning signs nailed to park entrances. The cub made it feel like a joke, but the law was no joke at all. She pulled her phone from her pocket and dialed the number for the North Carolina Wildlife Hotline. A recorded message played first, reminding callers that cubs often appear alone but usually aren't abandoned. That the best action is observation from a distance, and that human help can do more harm than good. She left a message anyway, voice shaking. There's a cub on my porch. She looks healthy but alone. My son is here. Please, call back. When she hung up, Wyatt tugged her sleeve. She's thirsty. Can't we just give her water? Lauren thought of the guidance, never leave food or water. Yet the cub sneezed again, pawing the wood like she was asking permission. Lauren stepped inside, filled a bowl, then stopped herself. She poured the water into a heavy metal dish and set it just beyond the porch on the gravel. No hand feeding, no coaxing closer, just water in case. A compromise. The cub waddled over, lapped noisily, then promptly tipped the dish onto her own paws. Wyatt snorted, covering his mouth. She's like a toddler. That small act providing without taming was her first test, and it wouldn't be the last. Within an hour, headlights swept the driveway. Their neighbor, Mr. Harris, an old ranger with a stiff knee and a lifetime of Smoky's stories, stepped out. He leaned on his cane, scanning the porch. You've got company, he said flatly. Cute company, but dangerous company. The cub was now pawing at the wicker chair, gnawing one of its legs as though auditioning for a comedy skit. Wyatt tried to show him the sketch. He'd made a quick pencil drawing of the cub mid-sneeze. Harris shook his head. She's wild. Remember that. The minute she thinks this place is home, she's lost. His words stung, but they carried truth. Across the region every year, dozens of black bear cubs have to be relocated or put down because people let them get too close. Habituation meant danger for the bear and for the people. Harris told them about one cub years ago that used to wander campsites winning snacks from laughing tourists. By autumn, that cub had grown strong and unafraid. When she pushed into a cooler, someone panicked. The rangers had no choice. She didn't make it to winter, Harris said softly. That's what happens when cuteness crosses into comfort. Lauren felt Wyatt's hand clutch hers. The lesson was clear. Rescue doesn't always mean keeping close. Sometimes rescue means refusing to make yourself the answer. She thought about this as the night deepened. The hotline hadn't called back. The cub curled up near the tipped water dish, paws twitching like she was dreaming of some better den. Wyatt whispered, "What if her mom never comes?" Lauren didn't know. What she did know was that her choices tonight could tip the balance between this cub surviving as a wild bear or becoming another cautionary tale. So she set rules of her own. The cub would never cross the threshold into the cabin. Food would never come from their hands. If they built anything, a temporary barrier, a shelter, it would only be to protect her from cars or dogs, never to trap her. "We help her stay wild," she told Wyatt. "That's the only help we give." The next morning, the phone rang. A woman from the hotline explained calmly that bear cubs often explore alone, and mothers usually return by dawn. If the cub was still there after 24 hours, they'd send an officer. "Don't feed her. Don't touch her. Don't film her location online," she warned. Lauren promised. After she hung up, Wyatt frowned. But if nobody feeds her, how does she live? This gave Lauren the opening for another small lesson. She reminded him that cubs learn to forage by trial and error. Their play, toppling chairs, pawing buckets, chewing towels, wasn't random. It was practice. Every stumble was muscle memory being built, every sniff a map of scent cues. "She doesn't need us to make her a pet," Lauren said. "She needs us not to stop her from becoming a bear." Wyatt nodded slowly, flipping to a new page in his sketchbook. He drew her again this time, upright, one paw on the chair, the other stretched like a performer, taking a bow. By noon, word had spread. 2 neighbors stopped by, curious one holding a phone. "We heard you've got a cub clowning around," one said. "That's a YouTube hit waiting to happen." Lauren bristled. She knew how fast cute animal clips could explode. Millions might laugh, but the cub could pay the price. A location tag, a careless title, a single snack tossed by a stranger could undo every instinct she needed to survive. Harris backed her up. "Don't post her. Don't turn her into a show." The neighbors left grumbling. This was the second test: laughter versus responsibility. In a culture trained to share every moment, choosing silence was harder than it looked. Yet Lauren chose it anyway. She wanted Wyatt to learn that not all stories are ours to broadcast. Some are meant to be kept remembered, quietly respected. That evening, Dr. Helena arrived, a retired veterinarian who had once worked in wildlife rescue. She carried no cage, no tranquilizer, only a notebook and gloves. From a distance, she observed the cub's gait, checked the set of her ears, and watched her stretch. "She's healthy," Helena murmured. "Likely just separated a little too far from her mother. If she's still here tomorrow, we'll reassess." Wyatt asked, "Can we at least build her a spot to sleep?" Helena hesitated, then nodded. "As long as it's not cozy. No pillows, no blankets, just cover from rain, open to the forest. Think of it like leaving an umbrella, not a bed." So they set up an old wooden crate at the edge of the driveway, roofed with a plank. The cub investigated, pawed at the box, then promptly ignored it and curled up on the gravel again. Wyatt giggled. "She likes the floor better." Lauren smiled faintly. Even in the rescue, the clown kept her role. By nightfall, the cub was still there, still performing in small ways. She batted a pine cone into the yard, chased it 3 steps, then tumbled headfirst into a patch of clover. Wyatt's laughter rang out again. But this time, Lauren didn't laugh immediately. She studied the scene carefully. A child laughing, a cub learning, a community split between fear and fascination, and the law silent but present like a shadow at the door. Helping wild animals is rarely about heroic action. It's about restraint. It's about knowing when not to feed, not to post, not to claim ownership. True rescue often feels like doing less than your heart wants. And yet in that gap, animals keep their wildness and people keep their integrity. As Lauren closed the porch door, she whispered to Wyatt, "She's not ours, she's just passing through." But even as she said it, she knew this passing through was already changing them. A cub had turned their quiet home into a classroom where every action carried weight. The night ended with the cub stretched in the crate at last, one paw dangling like a comedian exiting stage left. Wyatt sketched the moment before bed, and Lauren, staring at the drawing, wondered if tomorrow would bring a reunion with the mother or something much harder. Because sometimes rescue begins with laughter, but it never ends there. It ends with the law at your door, asking whether your compassion crossed the line. And that's where our story turns next, into the line between care and capture, and the voices determined to decide which side of it Lauren will stand on. By the third day, the cub had become a presence. Not a pet, not a guest, but something in between. A shadow that drifted from porch to driveway, tumbling into buckets, gnawing on shoes. Wyatt forgot outside, then collapsing in a heap as if she'd just finished a marathon performance. Neighbors whispered more. A few curious cars slowed, and Lauren's phone buzzed with half-joking texts. "Your clown cub has her own fan club now." But no fan club could answer the real question. What now? That's when Dr. Helena returned, this time with a decision in her eyes. She had seen this before, wild animals who edged too close to people, families who crossed from compassion into custody. She stood on the gravel drive, notebook in hand, and looked at Lauren. "If we're going to help her, we draw a line. Care without capture. That's it." Lauren frowned. "But isn't she already captured, just by being here?" "No," Helena said softly. "Captured is when you feed her, hold her name, her claim her. Right now, she still belongs to the forest. We have to keep it that way." It wasn't the answer Wyatt wanted. He had spent hours sketching the cub, filling pages with her comic stances. But what if she never finds her mom? Won't she starve? Helena crouched near him, her voice gentle. "Cubs are resilient. They can eat roots, bugs, and berries. They practice every day, even when it looks like they're playing. Our job isn't to turn her into a house cat. Our job is to make sure she has space to stay wild." "To prove her point," Helena gestured toward the yard. The cub was batting a pine cone across the gravel, tossing it into the air and pouncing, missing half the time, but trying again. That, Helena whispered, is hunting practice. She doesn't need us to show her. She's teaching herself. For Wyatt, that shifted something. His sketchbook wasn't just art anymore. It was record-keeping. He started noting not only the cub's poses, but her behaviors, pawing, climbing, tumbling. Lauren saw how his quiet observation became a kind of journal, not of ownership, but of witness. Helena laid out the practical side too. No food left out, no petting. If she gets too close, clapshoe her back. If you want to build something, build it at the edge of the forest, not your porch. Think of it like setting a boundary. She learns what's safe and you don't blur the lines. So they did. With Harris's help, they set up a soft lane leading from the yard into the tree line. Fallen logs rolled aside. Brush trimmed a clear path, scented only by the wind. They left no fruit, no bait. Just space. That night, when the cub explored, she found herself nudged by design toward the woods. She paused, looked back once, then rolled in the leaves as if to make her own joke of it. Lauren asked Helena why she was so strict. Helena's answer was a story. Years ago, she had taken in a barred owl with a broken wing. For months, she hand-fed it, kept it indoors, and grew attached. The wing healed, but the owl never relearned the sky. It perched in corners, silent, restless. "I gave it food," Helena said, "but I took its freedom. I promised myself I'd never blur that line again. If I help now, it's always care without capture. That confession settled into Lauren like a stone in water rippling outward. It wasn't about this cub alone. It was about her own life. Hadn't she too once blurred lines between mother and friend, between writer and dreamer, between surviving and truly living? The cub's clowning had cracked something open. Helena's words made it clear keeping isn't the same as loving. Sometimes the greatest care is letting go. Wyatt tested the rule that evening. When the cub waddled close, almost brushing his shoe, he wanted to reach out. Instead, he held Still's sketchbook balanced on his knee and whispered, "Stay wild, little clown." The cub sniffed, sneezed, then darted back toward the trees. He didn't cry. He drew her faster lines sharp as though sketching kept her close enough. The neighbors had their opinions. One called Lauren foolish. If you care, put her in a crate and drive her to a sanctuary. Another said she was reckless. If that bear grows up here, someone's going to get hurt. Harris, leaning on his cane, defended the choice. A sanctuary isn't magic. Most won't take a healthy cub. And turning her into a backyard mascot is worse. Let her earn her forest. Lauren knew he was right. But she also knew that choosing the harder path meant living with uncertainty. There would be no tidy ending, no guarantee the cub would survive the wild. Only a chance greater if they respected the line Helena drew. Here's the lesson this chapter leaves us: rescue is not possession. True rescue honors what a creature already is. A bear cub is not a kitten, not a pet, not a prop for cute animal videos. She is a wild animal, and the moment we erase that truth for our comfort, we endanger her future. Care without capture asks us to resist the pull of closeness, to love enough to step back. And here's the fresh perspective: these boundaries don't just protect the cub, they reshape us too. Wyatt learned patience, learning to watch, without touching, to record, without claiming. Lauren rediscovered discipline, resisting the urge to make a story bend to her desire. Even Harris, gruff as he was, softened when he saw Wyatt's drawings, realizing that the boy's sketches were building respect, not attachment. As dusk fell, the cub made her most dramatic performance yet. She balanced on the fallen log they had cleared, teetering, then flipped clumsily into the leaves. Wyatt laughed so hard he dropped his pencil. Lauren laughed too, but with a catch in her throat, because she knew now that every antic was both comedy and rehearsal, both joy and risk. Helena closed her notebook, satisfied. "She'll be fine," she said, "if you keep the line." Then she glanced at Lauren, almost as if to say the words weren't only about the cub. That night, as Lauren sat with Wyatt by the window, they watched the cub vanish into the dark. Wyatt whispered, "Do you think she'll come back?" Lauren didn't answer. Instead, she asked, "What did you notice today?" Wyatt flipped his sketchbook open. She played with pinecones. She climbed. She listened when I didn't move. Lauren smiled. Then she's learning, and so are we. This is how the third act of their story began, not with cages or collars, but with a path into the trees, and a boy learning to let silence mean connection. And yet, as the porch grew still, the mystery deepened. If the cub stayed away too long, should they call again? If she returned, clowning bolder than ever, would neighbors lose patience? How long could the balance hold before rules and reality collided? That's where our next chapter leads into the laughter that turned viral, the town divided, and the delicate thread between joy and consequence. Because in the Smokies, even clowns have to face the spotlight eventually. The next week unfolded like a comedy routine. Nobody rehearsed, but everybody watched. Each day, the tiny black bear cub returned with new material. One morning, she dragged a broom twice her size across the yard, tripping herself every 3 steps until it looked like slapstick theater. Another afternoon, she climbed halfway up the porch post, lost her grip, and slid down on her belly, squealing as if announcing her own failure. Wyatt laughed so hard he dropped his sketchbook. Lauren tried to stay serious, tried to remind him that wild animals weren't toys, but even she had to cover her mouth to hide the smile. The cub was a clown, no doubt. But Helena's words echoed every antic, meant something deeper. Helena explained it during her next visit. Play is practice. Bears don't run obstacle courses in gyms. They learn by tumbling. Every broom she drags, every slide she makes, it's coordination training. She's rehearsing the survival script. She pointed to the cub pawing at the broom. That tug strengthens her grip for when she digs roots. That climb and fall. She's learning her limits before she risks a taller tree. Laughter for us, but biology for her. Wyatt took that to heart. His sketches grew more detailed. He no longer drew just funny poses. He added notes in the margins. Grip practice. Climbing attempt. Pounce failed. What started as doodles became a field journal. And in that, a quiet transformation was happening. The boy who rarely spoke at school now explained bear behavior to his mother with confidence. She's not just being silly, Mom. She's training. One evening offered the clearest example. The cub crouched low in the grass, eyes fixed on a leaf blowing across the yard. She wriggled, leapt, landed nose first, then bounced up and tried again. Over and over, until at last she pinned the leaf with both paws. Wyatt cheered softly like a coach encouraging an athlete. Lauren realized what she was watching: a predator rehearsing. Clumsy, yes, but serious. Play disguised as comedy. Don't mistake play for wasted time. In children, in cubs, even in ourselves, play builds the muscles of resilience. It teaches risk, failure, and persistence. Wyatt learned that as he watched her pounce again and again. He told his mom, "It's like when I mess up a drawing. If I keep trying, the lines get better." She's doing the same thing. Lauren saw herself in that reflection too. Her half-finished play abandoned draft scenes that never worked. Maybe those weren't failures, maybe they were rehearsals. The cub's clowning reframed her own stumbles. Comedy as practice, mistakes as muscle memory. For the audience beyond their porch, this is a fresh perspective worth carrying. Laughter is a signal. It tells us something unusual is happening, something alive. But if we pause long enough, we see that the comedy isn't random, it's rehearsal for survival. In wild animals, play is biology in motion. In humans, it's creativity. Both matter more than we admit. Helena deepened this with a comparison. She told Wyatt about bobcats in Oregon, another wild neighbor often misunderstood. Bobcats look playful too, she explained, chasing grasshoppers, pouncing on leaves, batting sticks. But every game is stealth training. Bobcats are ambush hunters. They need silence, timing, and precision. If you see a bobcat cub leaping at shadows, you're seeing the foundation of a lifetime skill. Then she contrasted it with their bear visitor. Black bears aren't ambush hunters. They forage. They dig, climb, and scavenge. Their play looks louder, clumsier, but it's just as vital. They practice curiosity itself. Wyatt listened carefully, scribbling notes. So bobcats practice silence and bears practice noise? Helena laughed. Something like that. Both are learning how to be who they're meant to be. That sparked another realization for Lauren. Maybe the cubs' antics weren't meant only for survival. They were also lessons for them. Wyatt needed courage to speak at school. She needed courage to finish her play. Both had been hiding behind silence. Watching a creature stumble publicly without shame gave them a mirror. The cubs showed that mistakes weren't something to hide. They were something to rehearse until you got it right. Neighbors, however, didn't all see it that way. A few complained. One muttered that the bear was a nuisance. Another worried she'd grow bold and dangerous. One even suggested calling animal control to get rid of the clown before she bites someone. The community was split between delight and fear. Harris weighed in. She's not staying forever, but while she's here, she's teaching us something. We just have to pay attention. He wasn't sentimental by nature, but even he chuckled when the cub managed to balance a pine cone on her head like a circus act before sneezing it into the air. You can't tell me that's not worth watching. Lauren agreed, but she also saw the risk. Videos of cute animals often go viral. A black bear cub dragging a broom or sneezing at a pine cone could easily hit millions of views, but viral fame could invite cars, crowds, and chaos. She explained to Wyatt why they wouldn't post any footage. Some laughter belongs only to those who were there. That's how we protect her. He nodded, proud to keep the secret. His drawings, not videos, became their safe record. Here's the fresh takeaway: not all joy needs to be shared instantly. In an age where every laugh is uploaded, restraint itself becomes respect. Protecting wild animals sometimes means guarding their comedy as much as their safety. By late afternoon, one day after hours of tumbling, the cub did something new. She wandered to the edge of the cleared, soft lane into the forest, paused, then turned back. She rolled once in the dirt, shook herself, then disappeared among the trees. Wyatt waited, pencil poised, but she didn't return that night. He whispered, "Do you think she's gone?" Lauren answered, "Maybe she's just practicing leaving." That answer sat heavily with them both. Because the truth of wild animals is this: every laugh they give us is temporary. Their comedy isn't meant to stay under our lights. It's a rehearsal for a bigger stage, one we don't control. And that's the thread that will carry us forward. The cub's antics weren't just entertainment. They were a signal that she was growing stronger, preparing for a life beyond the porch. But not everyone in town could see it that way. Some saw comedy, others saw danger. And soon the clash between joy and responsibility would play out, not just in a yard, but in the whole community. The question waiting now is this: what happens when one cub's laughter reaches too far? When neighbors, strangers, and even the law weigh in? Does the story remain comedy? Does it turn into conflict? That's where we're headed next, into the moment when cute turns public and the cost of laughter grows heavier than anyone expected. It started quietly, the way trouble often does. One neighbor, walking her dog, paused at the edge of Lauren's yard. Phone lifted, recording the tiny black bear cub dragging an old bucket like a prop in a comedy skit. The cub flipped it, crawled inside, then rolled down the slope like a barrel with fur. Wyatt laughed from the porch. The neighbor laughed too, and then she posted it. By nightfall, the video had traveled farther than anyone expected. A friend shared it, then another. Within 24 hours, it hit thousands of views under the caption, "Tiny Bear thinks she's a comedian." Comments piled up, "Cutest thing I've ever seen." "Somebody give her her own channel. I'd drive to see this in person." The laughter was harmless online, but the consequences at their doorstep were not. The next morning, 2 cars slowed on the road. Strangers leaned out with cameras scanning for the cub. Later, a family parked nearby and lingered. "We heard there's a clown bear here," one child shouted. Wyatt froze. Lauren stepped onto the porch, protective, telling them it wasn't safe that the cub came and went on her own. The family left reluctantly, disappointed, but Lauren's chest tightened. Their secret wasn't a secret anymore. That evening, Harris came by, Kane tapping the gravel. He had seen the clip too. "You know what happens next," he warned. "Crowds, snacks tossed from cars. Bears start to expect it. That's when the game ends. Cute turns into conflict." His voice carried the weight of memory, too many cases where a cub's comedy led to tragedy. Lauren asked, "But isn't it good that people are seeing how amazing she is?" Harris shook his head. "Awareness is one thing, attraction is another. A wild animal that learns humans are an audience stops being wild. And when she grows, the world will punish her for it." Helena confirmed it during her visit. She explained how wildlife agencies measure risk. Bears labeled food conditioned or habituated often can't be relocated successfully. They return to towns drawn to trash porches, coolers. In some states, dozens are euthanized every year because too many people blurred the line between appreciation and interference. "It always starts with a laugh," Helena said quietly, "and ends with a bullet." The cub, meanwhile, kept rehearsing her routines. She pawed a broom, pounced on leaves rolled in clover. Unaware of the internet, unaware of debates swirling around her. Wyatt drew her with more urgency now, as if he could capture her innocence before it changed. He asked his mom, "Why do people want to see her if it could hurt her?" Lauren thought hard. Finally, she said, "Because laughter is powerful. It makes people feel alive." But sometimes people don't realize that their laughter has a cost. Here's the small lesson tucked inside this moment. What delights us can also endanger what we love, if we aren't careful. Viral videos of cute animals, bears, bobcats, even raccoons, often encourage imitation tourism or feeding. Our joy can accidentally rewrite an animal's fate. Protecting wild animals isn't just about fences and laws. It's about our choices, even small ones, about what we share, what we withhold, and what we value most, the laugh or the life. Lauren and Wyatt chose life. They made a pact: no filming, no sharing. Only sketches, only journals. When neighbors asked for more videos, Lauren politely refused. Wyatt, nervous but brave, spoke up one afternoon at school during sharing week. He held up his drawings, one of the cub crouched before a leaf, another of her wobbling on a broom. He explained what Helena had taught, that bears play to learn, not to entertain. His classmates listened, some amazed, some skeptical. One girl whispered, "That's better than YouTube." For the first time, Wyatt felt the power of telling a story responsibly. Lauren noticed the shift in him. He came home, smiling sketchbook tucked under his arm, repeating the questions his classmates asked. How big will she get? Will she stay funny? He had answered carefully. She'll get big, but she'll always be wild. That's the best part. His words reminded Lauren that education can be as contagious as entertainment. Still, the community's split remained. Some neighbors supported them, putting up bear-safe bins, clapping loudly when the cub came too close. Others muttered about danger, one even hinting at calling animal control. The tension grew heavier each day she appeared. Then came the turning point. A car stopped right in front of the yard. A teenager tossed out a bag of chips, shouting, "Here, funny bear!" The cub sniffed, dragged the bag, and tore it open with her paws. Wyatt cried out, "No!" Lauren rushed forward, clapping loudly, shouting, chasing the cub back toward the lane. The chips scattered, the cub startled, and for a moment, silence. Wyatt's eyes filled. She almost learned the wrong thing. That night, Helena sat with them. "This is what I meant. It takes one act to undo weeks of boundaries. If she connects food with humans, the comedy stops being safe. She won't understand why one person feeds her and another chases her. She'll just know humans mean food." Lauren nodded, her resolve steeled. She told Wyatt, "From now on, we protect her by teaching others. That's our job." So they did. Wyatt wrote short notes, taped them at the trailhead and mailbox. "Do not feed bears. Feeding kills. Let them stay wild." Lauren spoke to parents at school, reminding them how easily a cute moment could become a crisis. Harris convinced the town council to distribute bear-proof trash cans. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. And in that effort came a fresh perspective. Laughter can move us, but action sustains us. Viral fame fades. Responsible choices ripple. The cub's comedy had sparked joy across the internet, but the real transformation happened in the small town that learned slowly to laugh with respect instead of possession. For Lauren, it also rekindled her writing. She scribbled lines late at night, weaving themes of boundaries and comedy into her play. For Wyatt, it deepened his art. His sketches now layered with notes about behavior and conservation. Both mother and son were changing alongside the cub. The cub, of course, remained herself. One morning, she reappeared on the porch, balancing a pine cone on her nose before sneezing it skyward. Wyatt laughed, then whispered, "Stay wild." Lauren smiled, knowing the words were more than a wish. They were a line in the sand. And yet a quiet mystery lingered. The cub was growing. Her antics were sharper, her climbs higher, her paws heavier. What would happen when she stopped being little, when the comedy carried muscle behind it? Would the neighbors' patience hold? Would the town's new rules be enough, or would the law return harder than before? To decide her fate. That's where the story turns next, into the conflict between joy and fear. Into the debate over whether to let wild stay wild, or to intervene into the moment when a clown cub faces the cost of her own fame. Because every laugh carries a shadow. And soon the shadow would arrive at their door. It happened without warning. One morning, the yard was quiet, the porch broom untouched, the gravel empty. Wyatt sat with his sketchbook open, waiting, pencil still. Noon came. No sound of paws, no sneezes, no pinecone antics. By evening, Lauren admitted what her son refused to say: the cub was gone. At first, Wyatt convinced himself she was exploring. He checked the trail camera, flipped through every clip: a deer, a raccoon, a fox trotting past, but no tiny black bear cub. He whispered, "She'll be back tomorrow." Tomorrow came, and still no sign. The bucket lay where she had left it days earlier, gathering rainwater. For the first time since her arrival, the house felt larger than it needed to be. On the third day, neighbors began to ask. "Has your clown bear moved on?" one said with a smirk. Another muttered relief. "Good. Safer this way." But not everyone was glad. A child from down the road asked Wyatt if he'd scared her off. Wyatt shook his head, biting his lip. Lauren answered for him. "She belongs to the forest. Maybe she went where she was always meant to." That night, Wyatt cried quietly at the table. "Did we do something wrong?" he asked. Lauren thought of Helena's rule care without capture. "No," she said softly. "We did the only right thing. We let her stay wild. And wild sometimes means gone." The debate arrived soon after. A letter from Animal Control lay folded in the mailbox. Someone in town had reported a family harboring a cub. The letter warned of fines if evidence showed feeding or confinement. Harris stomped over, fuming. "This is what happens when people can't tell the difference between helping and hoarding," he growled. He vouched for them, but the warning cut deep. Even compassion was now under scrutiny. Helena joined them the next day, carrying her worn notebook. She listened as Wyatt described the silence, how he checked the porch every hour. She didn't sugarcoat. Cubs wander. They test the distance from their mothers. They get curious, sometimes lost. Sometimes they don't come back. Then she placed a hand on Wyatt's sketchbook. "But your drawings keep her alive here. That's your way of honoring her?" The boy nodded slowly. That night he drew her from memory, balanced on a pine cone, sneezing midair. He labeled it, "The day she taught me to laugh." Love isn't measured by keeping. It's measured by respect, by letting what you care for grow beyond you. Wyatt had to learn this truth earlier than most children, and through the antics of a wild animal instead of a friend. The mystery deepened on the fifth night. A trail cam near the soft lane finally lit up. For a flicker of seconds, eyes glowed in the dark, taller than before, shape broader. The cub, or perhaps her mother. The clip ended before certainty. Wyatt replayed it again and again. If she found her mom, then letting her go wasn't losing her. It was saving her. Lauren smiled faintly. Exactly, but the town remained divided. Some neighbors claimed victory, proof that leaving her alone works. Others accused Lauren of reckless attraction. What if she comes back bigger, stronger, dangerous? Fear was louder than hope, and that fear pressed closer when the phone rang again. A ranger scheduled to visit to ensure compliance. The law was watching, or Lauren sat long into the night, playing with a manuscript on her lap. Her pages, scattered and half-finished, mirrored her own questions. Could a story end well without control? Could letting go be an act of courage, not loss? She scribbled lines in the margin. Sometimes love sounds like silence. Wyatt curled on the couch, whispered a thought that startled her. Maybe she left to teach us something. Maybe she's saying, "Don't look for me, look for yourselves." That perspective, unexpected from a 12-year-old, struck deep. The cub had been clown and teacher, comedian and coach. Her disappearance wasn't just an absence, it was another lesson. A reminder that wild animals are not ours to summon. Their presence is a gift, their absence a truth. Helena reinforced this when the ranger arrived. She vouched for Lauren, and Wyatt explained their restraint and showed notes about boundaries and bear-proof bins. The ranger nodded, satisfied, warning them only once more. If she returns, keep it distant. Document responsibly. Don't let neighbors draw conclusions that invite intervention. As he left, he paused at Wyatt's sketch pinned on the fridge. "She looks like a handful," he said. Wyatt smiled faintly. She was. The cub remained absent. Days turned into a week. Each morning, Lauren brewed coffee, glancing at the porch, knowing it would be empty. Yet each day she felt something growing inside, a strange peace. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was space for gratitude. They had shared laughter with a creature most people only glimpse in passing. That memory was enough. And this is the fresh perspective the story offers. Wild encounters aren't meant to last forever. They're meant to shift us, to alter how we see ourselves and the world. Holding on too tightly ruins that gift. Accepting impermanence honors it. Wyatt surprisingly adapted first. He began drawing other forest animals, from memory raccoons, deer, even a bobcat he imagined stalking through the underbrush. He explained, "If I only draw her, I'll miss everything else. She'd want me to see the rest of the forest too." His art had expanded because his heart had. Lauren followed his lead. Her play took new shapes, scenes woven with silence, with exits as meaningful as entrances. She stopped writing about ownership and started writing about release. For the first time in years, her words felt true. Still, late at night, she found herself listening. Listening for a sneeze, a clumsy tumble, a broom dragged across gravel. And though it never came, she smiled in the dark, because the cub had already given her enough. The transition was clear now. The cub had vanished, but the lesson remained. Letting wild be wild is not just about the animal. It's about us, too. Our willingness to live without control, to laugh without possession, to remember without regret. But stories don't always stay settled. Just as peace returned to their cabin, just as Wyatt and Lauren found rhythm in silence, a new shadow loomed. Rumors of the cub resurfaced, bigger, bolder, spotted near garbage bins on the other side of town. And with rumors came voices calling again for action. That's where we turn next, into the moment when her return tests everything they've learned, when community lines harden, and when love must prove itself not in laughter, but in courage. Because sometimes, letting wild be wild is only the beginning of the hardest choice. The porch had been quiet for weeks. Wyatt still left his sketchbook on the table, by habit pencil tucked between pages, ready for the moment he hoped would come. Lauren tried not to count the days. Silence had become its own routine. Then, one rainy evening while she was washing dishes, Wyatt shouted from the window, "Mom, it's her!" Out in the yard stood the tiny black bear cub, only not so tiny anymore. Her legs were longer, her body thicker, her movements stronger. She shook herself in the rain, then did something familiar. She batted at the old broom, dragged it halfway across the yard, and toppled onto her back like a tumbler ending an act. Wyatt laughed through tears. The clown had returned, but this time something was different. She wasn't lingering on the porch. After her broom routine, she trotted toward the soft lane they had cleared months earlier. She paused, sniffed, then looked back once before vanishing into the trees. She had returned, but she wasn't staying. She was showing them she could come and go as she pleased. Helena visited the next day, notebook in hand, eyes sharp. She studied the cub from a distance as she appeared again at dusk. "She's grown well," Helena said. "That means she's been foraging, learning. Not dependent." Wyatt asked if that meant they had done the right thing. Helena nodded. "Exactly. You gave her space. Now she's a forest animal again, not a porch performer." Lauren exhaled with relief, but also felt the ache of release. The cub, who once rolled in buckets and sneezed pine cones, was now on the edge of independence. She had come back not to be kept, but to show she was ready to leave. Still, she offered one more performance. That evening, she climbed the fallen log in the yard, teetered, then balanced perfectly before hopping down. Wyatt clapped softly. "She's better now, stronger." Lauren realized he was right. The stumbles, the antics, the comedy, all of it had been practice for this becoming capable enough to survive. Here's the explanation Helena gave them. Black bear cubs often stay with their mothers for over a year, but sometimes circumstances separate them early. The ones that survive alone do so because of relentless practice digging for grubs, rolling logs, climbing trees, chasing leaves. What looked like clowning was the curriculum of survival. "She's graduated," Helena said simply. From porch performer to forest pro, the small lesson was clear. What we see as foolishness can be a foundation. Ooh. Wyatt had learned it through his art pages, filled with sketches of failed pounces, awkward tumbles, broom battles. Each page now reads like a record of progress. Failure was never wasted. It was rehearsal. He whispered, "She taught me not to be scared of mistakes." Lauren carried a lesson too. Her unfinished play, once a burden, was now alive with new meaning. Watching the cub return and then step away reminded her that stories don't have to end neatly. They can end in motion, in mystery. Sometimes the most honest ending is letting a character walk into the forest unseen but understood. The fresh perspective that grew in both of them was this true release isn't loss, it's trust. Trust that what you love will continue without you. Trust that the laughter you shared mattered, even if it didn't last forever. And trust that wild animals are stronger when we let them remain wild. The community saw the change too. Neighbors who once feared her began to notice she no longer lingered near trash cans or porches. She was growing cautious, returning to her instincts. Harris told Lauren, "You did right by her. She won't end up another statistic. She'll live out there where she belongs." But not everyone agreed. A few muttered that she'd be back bigger and bolder. The debate never fully died. Yet for Lauren and Wyatt, the proof was in the cub itself, healthy, wary, capable. One night, Wyatt left his sketchbook open on the porch, a new page blank. At dawn, he found it damp from dew, but on the page was a paw print, faint and muddy, right across the margin. He traced it with his finger and smiled. "She signed it," he whispered. For him, that was enough. A goodbye that wasn't really goodbye. Lauren felt something similar when she saw the cub one last time weeks later near the tree line at sunset. The cub balanced briefly on her hind legs, sniffing the air, then dropped to all fours and disappeared into the green. No drama, no farewell. Just presence, then absence. That was wildness. The renewal wasn't only in the cub, it was in them. Wyatt grew more confident at school, speaking about wildlife, showing his sketches, and even teaching classmates why feeding wild animals was dangerous. He had found his voice. Lauren finished her play, debuting it at the local theater, a story about boundaries, laughter, and release. Both had been transformed by a cub who never knew she was teaching. And here's the perspective worth carrying. Sometimes the animals we meet don't need saving, they need space. Their gift to us isn't permanence. It's a glimpse of resilience, a reminder that comedy and survival can share the same stage. As for the cub, she had graduated. The porch was no longer her arena. The forest was. From clown to survivor, from dependent to independent, she had crossed the line Helena set for her. The story, though, wasn't quite done. Because months later, rumors would ripple again of sightings deeper in the woods of a larger bear with the same odd habit of rolling logs like toys. And once, just once, someone swore they saw her with a smaller shape at her side. That mystery is where we turn next. The possibility of legacy, of continuity, of a cub who once made a town laugh, now raising her own. Because in the Smokies, comedy doesn't vanish. It echoes, passed from one generation to the next. In the end, the story wasn't about a cub dragging a broom, sneezing at a pine cone, or tripping over buckets. It was about what those moments revealed in us. The tiny black bear cub had come into Lauren and Wyatt's lives like a clown crashing a stage, unexpected, messy, hilarious. She had left just as suddenly her stage traded for the forest. But what remained was something deeper than laughter. The clearest payoff appeared in Wyatt. The boy who once spoke little now stood in front of his classmates, sketchbook open, explaining how wild animals play to learn. He told them about the broom routine, but instead of just saying it was funny, he explained how it built the cub's grip. He described the leaf pounce not as silliness, but as practice for hunting beetles and roots. His teacher later told Lauren, "He spoke like a scientist, but with the heart of an artist." That transformation began with laughter, but it ended with confidence. For Lauren, the payoff was more personal. Her unfinished play, once a burden of blank pages, became a living piece. She wrote scenes of silence and comedy side by side. She wrote a character who appeared only briefly but changed everyone she touched. The story premiered at the small town theater. People laughed at the funny scenes, but they left talking about the ending where the character vanished into the forest, leaving others to carry the memory. It was fiction, but the audience recognized the truth behind it. The cub had written the final act for her. Knowledge came too tucked inside every antic. Helena reminded them again and again, play is not waste. In black bears, it builds survival. In bobcats, it hones its stealth. In wolves, it forges bonds. Play is practice, whether in forests or classrooms. For humans, laughter is more than joy. It's how we learn, how we recover from mistakes, how we trust again. The cub's antics were a biology lesson disguised as comedy. There was another layer of knowledge, the law. They learned how thin the line was between helping and harming, between compassion and control. Fair use in wildlife terms. Helena joked, meant comment without capture. You could watch record sketch, tell stories, but the moment you fed or confined, you crossed into ownership. That lesson mattered as much as the biology. Because too many wild animals become endangered, not just from habitat loss, but from our inability to step back. Respecting that line became the family's quiet legacy. The emotional weight sat not in the antics, but in the absence. The silence that followed her disappearance taught them the value of impermanence. It showed them that joy doesn't need to last forever to matter. The cub was never meant to grow up in their yard. She was meant to return to the Smoky Mountains, to forage, climb, maybe raise cubs of her own. Their role was never to keep her. Their role was to remember her, to let her wildness ripple into their own lives. The lesson for viewers is simple, but demanding love does not always mean holding close. Sometimes it means stepping back. Sometimes it means letting wild be wild. When we resist the urge to control, we honor the gift we've been given. The cubs showed us that boundaries are not walls, they're bridges between respect and freedom. From this perspective, laughter became more than entertainment. It became evidence. Evidence that even in difficult times, joy can return in the most unlikely ways. Evidence that a boy with a sketchbook can grow into his voice. Evidence that a mother can find her story again through the antics of a wild neighbor. And evidence that our world is richer when we don't try to own every miracle it offers. And so, why did we need the clown? Because she reminded us that comedy heals. She reminded us that play builds resilience. She reminded us that wild animals are not props for viral videos, but teachers of patience, courage, and humility. She reminded us that the forest is still alive with lessons, if only we stand still long enough to notice. One last example sealed this truth. Months after the cubs' final visit, Wyatt and Lauren hiked a trail near the ridge. They found claw marks on a beech tree far above Wyatt's reach. Helena explained later that young bears often mark trees to practice climbing and to signal their presence. Wyatt placed his hand on the marks and whispered, "She made it." That moment didn't bring laughter. It brought something better, trust. Here's the fresh perspective I want you to carry. Joy isn't fragile when it comes from the wild. It doesn't break when it leaves. It deepens. We didn't lose the clown when she walked into the forest. We gained a mirror. A reminder that we too can grow stumble practice and still become stronger. And now, as this story closes, I want to leave you with a question. What wild laughter has entered your life? Maybe it was a dog tripping over her own tail, or a raccoon sneaking into your yard, or a child inventing a game that made no sense but filled the air with giggles. Did you see it only as comedy, or did you pause long enough to notice the lesson inside? If this little black bear cub made you smile, if she reminded you of your own resilience, if she nudged you to see wild animals, not just as cute, but as teachers, then her work here is done. And now it's your turn. Take a breath. Reflect on what laughter has meant in your own life. Then, if this story left you with a spark like it did for us, leave a comment below. Write one. if you've ever learned from a silly or clumsy moment, or 0 if you believe the world needs more wild laughter. And before you go, please like this video, subscribe, and tap the notification bell. That way you won't miss the next story where wonder, knowledge, and joy always go hand in hand.